Hello and welcome, dear students. Hope you might be feeling well, and hopefully you might have received the notes on your previous chapter of your science book, that is reproduction. Today we are going to discuss heredity, and in the upcoming lecture we will be discussing evolution. So let's begin. As you all guys know that any organism, either human beings or any other organism, the individuals of a species are differentiated on the basis of color, height, complexion, that is skin color, color of eyes, color of hairs, hairstyles. All these things are known as characters or traits. Thus, we can say that the traits or characters form the recognizable feature, or else we can say these traits helps us to differentiate among the individuals of the same species. The transmission of these traits from the parents to the offsprings is called heredity. The information which determines these traits or characters is present in the gametes of the parents, that is the male gamete and the female gamete, or we can say the sperm cells and the egg cells. Thus, the gametes forms a connecting link between one generation and the next generation with respect to the passage of characters from mother and the father to the offsprings. Thus, the individual possesses the characters which are transmitted to them from the parents. These characters are thus the maternal or the paternal characters. Okay. Now, the differences in these characters or traits among the individuals of a species is called variation. As you guys might have noticed that the offsprings of the same parent, except the twins, that is monozygotic twins, are never alike. Though the parents are same, but there are variations with respect to certain external as well as internal characters, like as hair color, way of speaking, height, complexion, etc. Thus, the offspring is never a true copy of a parent. It can be understood in a manner, for example, if one of the parent is tall and other one is dwarf or of average size, the offspring may be either tall or dwarf. But sometimes what happens, there are certain genes which regulates these characters, though they may not be expressed in one of the parents, but due to mutation and the crossing over which occurs due to the gamete formation, some genes which might have not expressed themselves in the parents may get expressed in the offsprings. So, there they form the new character, which is altogether different from the parents. Thus, we can say that the variation occurs and results in the occurrence of an altogether different set of characters in an offspring. There are many kinds of variations in human species, like free and attached earlobes, different complexions, that is, some are dark, some are light brown, some are wheatish, some are fair, some are dusky, etc. Different eye colors, height is different, chin, the chin may be either clifted or pointed, hair color, hair type, nose, etc. The significance of variation shows up only if it continues to be inherited by the offsprings for several generations. That means we can only feel or we can only come to know the importance of these variations if they are continuous. That means they occur in each and every generation. These variations ultimately lead to the evolution, as we all know that our environment is continuously changing. That means we have to change, we have to adapt ourselves into the changing environment, and these changes only crept in us when there are certain variations in us. That means the generation in which the variations occur may become adaptable to the changing environment. So, in that very much perspective, these variations are highly beneficial to a species. There are some important terms which you must know before continuing the lecture. These are chromosomes. What the word chromosome mean? Chromosome is actually a term which is used to describe a thread-like structure in the nucleus of a cell formed of DNA which carries the genes. And what the gene is? Gene, it is a unit of DNA on chromosome which governs the synthesis of one protein that controls and specifies or controls a specific character of an organism. Genes are actually units of heredity which transfers characteristics from parents to their offsprings during reproduction. Thus we can say that gene thus we can say that gene is a functional unit of DNA. The genes can be broadly classified as dominant genes and recessive genes. The dominant gene is actually the one which appears, or else we can say the gene which decides the appearance of an organism even in the presence of alternate contrasting gene is known as dominant gene. It is always shown or represented by a capital letter. A recessive gene, it is contrary to dominant gene. That means the gene which can decide the appearance of an organism only in the presence of another identical genes is a recessive gene. It is represented by the corresponding small letter. The next term is genotype. Genotype is actually the description of genes present in an organism. What sort of genes are present in an organism? Which one is dominant? Which one is recessive? The complete information about the genic composition of an organism is known as its genotype, while as the phenotype is the characteristics which are visible in an organism, these are actually the characters which are controlled by the genotype of an organism, but they are visible externally and are known as phenotype. First filial generation, or F1. When two parents cross to produce offspring, their offspring is called first filial generation or F1 generation. Now, the second filial generation or F2 generation, when the first generation offsprings cross among themselves to produce second generation offsprings, then this offspring is called second filial generation or F2 generation. Now, as you all know, genetics is actually based on some basic experiments which were done very much before by Gregor John Mendel. Thus, we can say that the father of genetics is Gregor John Mendel. He was the first scientist to make a systematic study of the patterns of inheritance, that is, how the characters are inherited from parents to offsprings, which involved the transfer of characteristics from parents to progeny. Mendel chose pea plants for studying the inheritance because pea plants had a number of clear cut differences which were easy to tell apart. For example, tall and dwarf pea plants. Some pea plants produced round yellow seeds while others produced wrinkled green seeds, etc. Another reason for choosing pea plant was that they were self-pollinating. Also, Mendel chose pea plants because many generations of pea plant can be produced in a comparatively short period of time and their study is much simpler than that of animals. On the basis of his experiments, he put forward various laws which are known as Mendel's laws of genetics. The first one is law of segregation. Mendel's first law of inheritance or the law of segregation, it states that means its statement is the characteristics or the traits of an organism are determined by internal factors which occur in pairs. Only one such factor can present in a single gamete. Okay, this is the statement of law of segregation. Here, the Mendel was not aware of the genes, what the genes actually are. So, at that very time, he used the term factor. Now, these factors are actually the genes. Thus, we can make another statement of Mendel's law of segregation. That means the traits of an organism are determined actually by the internal factors which was used by the term used by Mendel. Now we can replace the term factor by gene. Thus, the characters of an organism are determined by genes which occur in pairs. That means there are two genes for a single character. You guys should keep it in mind. That means two genes, two similar genes controls a single character. And at the time of gamete formation, there occurs meiosis, that is a sort of cell division which you will learn in higher classes, in which these two these two genes segregate. That means they get separated from one another and pass on into a single gamete as a single copy. Thus, only one factor, or we can say that only one gene of a character is present in a gamete. And when the two gametes, that is paternal gamete and maternal gamete, fuses, the nuclear constituent combines. That means the genes combine again. The two similar chromosomes begin to assemble and these two genes from one from paternal and one from, that means one from father and one from mother, combine again, come closer to each other and controls the same trait again. Okay, now the second law, known as law of independent assortment. Mendel's second law of inheritance or law of independent assortment states that in the inheritance of more than one pair of traits in a cross simultaneously, the factor responsible for each pair of traits are distributed independently of the gametes. That means if the two traits are controlled by two pairs of genes which lie close to each other during the gamete formation, the distribution of these genes into the gametes is independent of one another. That means one doesn't influence the distribution of another gene. Okay? Now, how these traits are transmitted? The characteristics of traits of parents are transmitted to their offspring through genes present on their chromosomes during the process of sexual reproduction. Gene works in pairs as already discussed. For every trait, there is a pair of gene, one dominant and one recessive. Each parent passes only one of the two genes of the pair of each characteristic. Though the offspring inherits two genes for each trait from its parents, but the traits shown by the offspring depends on which inherited gene is dominant of the two. Here the variation comes into effect. Genes. When a male gamete fuses with a female gamete during fertilization, they make a new cell called zygote with a full set of genes on a full set of chromosomes. In humans, the full set or the complete set of chromosomes, that is diploid set of chromosomes, is 46. The zygote grows and develops to form a new organism having characteristics or traits from both the parents which it has inherited through genes. Now, only those characters or traits will be expressed for which the genes are in dominant state. The two genes or a pair of genes responsible for a particular characteristic or a trait are always present on the corresponding position of the pair of chromosomes. The pair of chromosomes which have similar composition, that means similar set of genes, is known as homologous pair of chromosomes. Now, blood groups, as it is one of the aspect or one of the topic in your textbook, we have to go through it very much briefly. A person has one of the four blood groups, as you all know that we have usually four blood groups. Actually there are more than 100 types of blood groups, but they are very rare, and most commonly occurring blood groups are only four, that is A, B, O, AB. A and B are codominant genes. That means both are present in dominant state, but one influences the dominance of another. Whereas O is a recessive gene. The gene for blood groups are denoted by IA. A is a superscript and IB. Okay. If the genotype is IA, IA or IA, IO, then the blood group is A. It can be understood from the fact that both the blood groups, in the first one, the genes controlling the blood group is AA, both are in the dominant state, that means it is A blood group. And in the second one of the gene is recessive and the dominant will influence. So the blood group will be A. If the genotype is IB or IBIO, then the blood group is B. As in the first case, both the genes are dominant, that is B, and in the second one is dominant and one is recessive. The effect of recessive gene will be masked by the dominant gene, so the blood group will be B. If the genotype is IO, then the blood group is O, because the genes present there both are recessive. When both the recessive genes are present, they will show their effect. Okay. Similarly, there is sex determination, that is how the sex of an individual is determined, how we can say that this is a female or this is a male on the basis of its genotype, not on the basis of external features, that is phenotype. The process by which the sex of a person is determined is called sex determination. The chromosome which determines the sex of a person are called sex chromosomes. Sex chromosomes in males, as you all know, that is XY. Likewise in females, there it is XX. During the process of sperm formation, that is gamete formation, there is a segregation of the genes, of the chromosomes rather. That means one X from male will go into one sperm cell and another Y will go into the another sperm cell. Likewise, the female gamete will have X chromosomes in both of its eggs. Okay. Thus, when the fertilization occurs, it is the constitution of sperm which determines the sex of the individual. If a sperm carrying X chromosome fertilizes the ovum, then the constitution will be XX. That means female will be produced. If the sperm carrying Y chromosome fuses with the female gamete, the baby will be a male, or we can say a male or a female. Sex is determined by the sperm. Okay. Acquired and inherited traits. The traits of an organism which is not inherited but develops in response to the environment is called an acquired trait. On the basis of this very much reason, Lamarck was able to give its theory of evolution known as inheritance of acquired traits. Acquired traits cannot be passed on to the future generation. For example, knowledge of doing something or any characteristic which is caused due to environmental factor and not present by birth. Okay. A trait of an organism which is caused by a change in its DNA or gene is called inherited trait. These are the characteristics which we receive from our parents. Only these traits can be transmitted to the future generation. Example, eye color, skin complexion, etc. Now at the end, there are some questions. You guys have to go through these, and at the end there are the answers of each question. Okay, that's all for today. Have a nice day. Inshallah, in the next lecture we will be discussing genetics. Sorry, not genetics. Today we discussed genetics, and in that very lecture we will discuss evolution. That is the second part of this chapter. Okay, best of luck. Stay home, stay safe.